This is Carl Rollison, author of The Last Days of Sylvia Plath, published by the University Press of Mississippi. I arrived in London about 4 months after Sylvia Plath ended her life on February 11, 1963. I was 15 years old, part of a group of Shakespearean players who would tour the country for 3 weeks. What happened to Sylvia Plath in the last 7 fateful months of her life will never be entirely known. But virtually every year, and with each biography, we edge closer to understanding the fraught circumstances that culminated in her suicide. Was Sylvia ever really warm in England? I felt so blue with these repeated sinus colds, she wrote, made worse at Christmas 1960 by an unheated train. For Sylvia, it had been a hard winter in 1962. She thought of the cold, as she had done in her Cambridge winters, as the personification of her nemesis, meanly nipping my ankles and leering. Over the course of the summer of 1962, Ted Hughes's behavior became stranger and stranger. And it is a wonder Plath could keep up with his metamorphoses. She described Ted's manic phase as a rampage, a kind of ego-fascist will to destruction, evident in a line from his poem, Hawk Roosting. I kill where I please because it is all mine. On September 17, 1962, Dr. Barnhouse, Sylvia Plath's therapist, wrote to sort out exactly how she could help Sylvia. Am I being consulted as a woman, mother, witch, earth goddess, or a mere psychiatrist? The very question suggests how central Barnhouse was to Plath's own sense of identity. Plath was approaching another winter season, another cycle of depression and doubt, but also this time, the promise of the magnificent poetry she continued to write, as in a work of this period, Wintering. On October 9th, she wrote of the cold setting in, her bees in a ball, black, mined against all that white. Would Sylvia's mind hold up against all that white, that winter cold? The bees, all women, presided over by their queen, have gotten rid of the men, those stumblers and bores. The poem is part of the woman morale that Sylvia had sought and now could exercise, since she had rejected Ted's terms for continuing on. The snow drops its pieces of darkness, Plath wrote in the Munich Mannequins on January 28th, annihilating the prosy pleasantries of Snowblitz, a light-hearted piece she wrote about that terrible winter in England, the snow breath that tamps the womb. In Contusion, completed on February 4th, 1963, just a week before she died, she ends with the portentous line, "The mirrors are sheeted," the sense of closing up, of not seeing oneself reflected in the hopes of others, and the covering of objects in rooms no longer used, as if after a death, is pervasive. Plath had imagined herself, in the heyday of her marriage to Ted Hughes, as a sovereign at their country home, Court Green, in a world she had made and reigned over. She had begun the work of rebuilding her world in her last book of poems, Ariel, but deprived of the thought of home, fearing a return to an asylum, and no longer being able to own and control her own voice, she assumed another kind of control over her life by ending it. Like Plath, I came from a suburban, middle-class upbringing and was startled by my first overseas trip in 1963 at the state of post-war Britain still in recovery. I remember the sooty look of Yorkshire and the gray landscape of graves.